And then something else I wanted to ask you about is, especially like in a lot of your conversations, I guess I read this on a subreddit, that someone was talking about people's ability to grapple with like hypotheticals, and that like there's a point where if someone's like I guess IQ is just the metric by proxy or something else, it says you're so stupid that like if someone said to you, like if someone had breakfast and lunch yesterday morning, you ask them what would it be like if you didn't, and they'd respond with, "Well, I did have breakfast yesterday," and you say that okay, that person can't conceptualize like that. It's not even that they're being bad faith, that they're not conceptualizing those things. And it felt like, and I don't know if you felt like this, did you feel like when you ran into that, there was a person you were debating with an abortion, where you gave the example of like a test, and they're like, imagine a test that could like show the viability. I'm like, well, what test? I'm like, I don't know, just a button. And they're like, well, there's no button that can do, like they started grappling, trying to struggle with the concept of a test because they were getting stuck. How do you deal with those situations where it feels like you can't even tell if they don't want to answer the hypothetical, or if they're really just at a level where they can't conceptualize these things?
I think that the 4chan post about like people having too low of an IQ to conceptualize hypotheticals, I think it's like a funny post, and I think it's like interesting to read and think about, but I don't think that that's actually what's happening. When people don't want to consider hypotheticals, I think there's a couple things going on. Either one, the hypothetical betrays so much of what they think is important or fundamental or vital to their understanding of something, they don't want to engage with it. Two, they're in debate mode, and if they engage with a hypothetical, they're trying to think one or two steps ahead, and they won't engage with it because they think it's going to lead them down like a bad argumentative pathway. Or three, they're fixated on some part of the example that is so not what you're fixated on that they think that your hypothetical is completely different, right? It would be like if somebody says, let's say that John walked into my house and stole from me, you agree that that would be bad, just like when Jane shot Bruce or whatever, right? And maybe you're just trying to make an argument of like, well, these people are doing crimes unprovoked, it's not good, but the other person is like fixated on like the gender of the perpetrator, and they're just like, your example doesn't even make sense, it doesn't fit, because you guys aren't connecting on what you're trying to illustrate with an example or an analogy. It could be that some people are actually just retarded, but there have been a couple of things that I've done where people seem to be a lot more intelligent than I thought. Like, I think this has happened a couple times to me, where for a while I was under the impression that if I challenge somebody to a bet about a thing, that they're going to run away because they know that they don't have the adequate information to substantiate a point. So here's what I thought. Somebody's going to say something like, Trump is winning the next presidential election 99%. And I might say like, oh, 99%. Will you give me 50 to 1 odds? Will you give me 50 to 1 odds then on a bet? Or even 2 to 1 odds on a bet? If you think it's 90%, 99%, if you think it's that high, can you give me like 2 to 1 odds on a bet then? We'll do it, right? Here's what I expected people to say, okay? What I expected people to say is, no, fuck you. I don't need to bet to prove my point, and just walk away. But that's not what people say. What instead people say is like, well, hold on. If we're going to bet on it, well, Trump could get sick and die. He might lose some of his cases. Maybe there's more stuff that we haven't heard about yet. Not only does their opinion moderate and they become more reasonable, but I actually find out you actually had all the facts and information in your head. You just, for whatever reason, weren't applying it. That was really shocking to me. So yeah, I don't know. When people can't engage in hypotheticals, I don't think it's because they're so stupid that they can't. I think they're just like in debate brain mode, and they're not able to engage in the hypothetical because of that. Not because they're like stupid. That's my feeling, but I could be wrong. Somebody posted a quote by an old philosopher who stole my betting take. He must have had a time machine. I don't know if it was, I don't think it was Hume. It might have been Nietzsche or something. There was like a picture of his quote about betting, and it matched in exactly with what I've been talking about recently, but I don't know if somebody has this. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that I'm just curious your thoughts on, because you've been hit like where I think it was like Amos Yee made some hypothetical about like what if child in some way could be useful and like, but like created a ridiculous hypothetical, and then when you respond to it, even if you just go I can engage with it, people will like take it in bad faith. So like if I asked you like if injecting lava into someone who had cancer would cure their cancer and wouldn't actually harm them, would you think we should inject people with lava who have cancer? Yeah. I would suspect the answer would be yes, but then then people would run with that and go, he thinks lava cures cancer. And you're like, yeah. I never said
it's
that.
Just, it's like, frustrating. For people, the problem is when you deal with people like that, there are other things at play that don't have anything to do with a person's intelligence. Remember, one of the things that I said that I believe more and more strongly every day is people's political beliefs and social beliefs are often dictated by the social groups that they're in. So when they're analyzing political or social beliefs, they're thinking about adherence to the social group first. So if the answer is like Destiny bad and they see a clip from me, they're going to analyze it as Destiny bad. Or if they're like a content creator, they're going to give the Destiny bad take so that everybody else can say Destiny bad, and then that's like the extent of their analysis. That's literally it. There's not like a breakdown in intelligence here, because if they were to look at any of the original clips, like, okay, yeah, it's pretty obvious what he's saying here, but they don't, because they're not trying to like critically analyze or run it through some deductive or inductive logical process. They're just like, what does my social group demand of me? How can I look at this in a way that conforms with those views? And then you give that take, and that's it. It's basically just that. Yeah.
When you're talking to people like that, if you're in the real world, how do you talk to someone like that? So if you hear someone like basically feel like they're just kind of giving the takes, but they're trying to have a conversation, they seem to act like they're having a conversation with you about the topic, but it feels like that's what's happening. Would you respond in those situations? I
mean, it depends on where the person is. I appeal back to that one paper that talked about the difference between like echo chambers versus epistemic bubbles. If a person is in an epistemic bubble and they just haven't seen anything, usually if you show them new information, they're really receptive to change, and they'll probably change over time, right? Because they're in a bubble where they just don't see much. They just don't see much of the other information. That's why for a lot of like Vosh and Hassan fans, when they see my content, they're like, oh, this guy actually seems more chill than I thought, and it's like over like that. Like it breaks the illusion immediately. For people that are stuck in echo chambers, the way that this particular author defined an echo chamber was echo chambers don't just have epistemic bubbles where you only get information from a couple sources. They also work to actively discredit all outside sources. So there's a huge phenomenon of people that are Trump fans. It's not just enough to say that you believe Trump. You also, to have adherence to that social group, you also have to say, not only do I trust Trump, I don't trust Big Pharma. I don't trust Fauci. I don't trust all these government organizations. I don't trust academia. I don't trust the media. I don't trust, right? When you run into those people, that's like the billion-dollar question. Everybody wants to know, how do you change their mind? But nobody does. That's a really, really, really hard solution. I don't think anybody, you can, but it's like a multifaceted approach of like friends and social circles and information and blah. There's like a ton of different things you have to do. Yeah. That's really difficult.
But part of it is, I guess, it feels almost normal that, I guess, for a human, that if you're that deep into things, so like, imagine you're a flat earther. Mm-hmm. Like if you're that deep in it, even if you can give them a contradiction in their beliefs, they're not going to immediately change their minds, but you wouldn't expect them to, in the same sense that even if you don't know anything about, so you believe the earth is round, but you really haven't done any research into it, and someone gives you a contradiction, you shouldn't immediately believe that something's wrong. You should believe that you're missing information that would prove, like, you're like, no, I'm pretty sure I have enough things to still say I'm right. Mm-hmm. That one thing's a contradiction that I don't understand, so clearly there must be something I'm just not understanding. Like, so they'll maintain their belief. You kind of need to build those up, I guess. Like, you need to have enough contradictions that might change their mind or something. I don't know.
A little bit. So remember, to resolve cognitive dissonances, you either change what you believe or you misrepresent the other side, or try to find a way to dismiss the thing that causes the contradiction, right? Those are the two ways to do it. So you either update your beliefs accordingly to become correct, or you find a reason why the other person criticizing you is wrong, and then you don't have the dissonance anymore. The problem is there's this oft-repeated quote of, you can't reason somebody out of a belief that they didn't reason themselves into. If we go back to my model of people typically pick beliefs because of adherence to like social circles and whatnot, if you take somebody who has a certain belief and that belief wasn't something that they arrived at reasonably, but it's kind of like in this weird way tied into every other belief they have, that one belief can probably never be changed. It can't be, because that individual belief was not reasoned into. That belief became packaged with 50 million other things. Like, I'll bully Trump people more. When we talk about something like the COVID vaccines, okay, there's not a single anti or skeptical Trump person that did a whole bunch of research and was like, you know what? I'm not too sure about the experimental. Nobody got there that way. They inherited that belief as part of a huge set of other beliefs that are all self-reinforcing. But the problem with getting a packaged set of beliefs like that is if you question or take away one of them, everything falls apart. So you often can't do that. So for instance, if I were to say like, okay, well, hold on, let's talk about this vaccine stuff. How do you explain all of the academic institutions? Well, obviously they're bought and paid for by Big Pharma. They're compromised. Okay, well, how do you explain pharmaceutical companies competing with one another? Well, all of them get regulated by the and they're compromised. Okay, well, how do you explain like all the other countries in the world agreeing with them? Well, the World Economic Forum and Klaus, they actually control all those governments, so they're compromised. So there is no actual source of epistemic truth outside of the echo chamber they live in that you can appeal to, and that protects every single belief that. Because remember, if they concede on a single one of these, that maybe Ukraine does have a right to defend itself, maybe maybe it is worth getting vaccinated for COVID. Maybe all the bullshit medications like hydroxychloroquine, maybe that was all bullshit. If they concede on any of these, they have to find a different source of epistemic truth, or they have to start applying a critical thought process that they haven't applied for any of their other beliefs, and everything just like completely falls apart. I'm bullying Trump people, but a lot of this might be similar with like really far left progressive people when you talk about like anything related to like oppressor-oppressee dynamics or any of those huge academic understandings of like racism or violence, that when you start to knock down one or two of these things, everything else would also collapse in on itself because they're all like packaged belief systems, you know?